Hi there, it's Paul Rivoche, and this is another installment in my series called Toth Cards. And that's a series where I read out postcards that I received from a very accomplished cartoonist and animation artist, Alex Toth. So for those who might not know him, I'm going to show just a couple of examples, some work that I admire by him. There's so much because he had an extensive career, mostly in comics, but like I said, also in animation art. He did presentation boards, design, model sheets for various cartoon series. And then he also did presentation boards, design sheets, storyboards, all kinds of stuff. So in this postcard I'm going to read out, it's from, here, let's make it full screen. It's from 20th June 1988, and so he was fortunate enough to send me these. I was fortunate enough to receive these postcards from him. We corresponded back and forth, like I've said in other videos. It was pre-internet, so I guess it's a dying thing, but people would correspond back and forth because that's what you had. You could either phone people, of course, or by the good old landline, or you could write letters or postcards. So that's what we did. And it wasn't a weekly thing or anything like that. More so like every couple of weeks, maybe every few months sometimes. And there were bigger gaps. I would write him and he'd always write back. So yeah, it was interesting. And what did I say? I'll give some examples of his work for people that might be watching this that don't know. And these are almost like at random examples I chose that I like. They're just hundreds and hundreds of stuff I've got in a folder. This is a story for DC Comics where Archie Goodwin wrote this great story for him using Batman, but also involving airplanes, which Alex loved drawing. And this is, I actually don't know the story on this. Alex Toth Reader cover. Yeah, that was cover for one of his books, printing his artwork. I love the black and white, high contrast lighting that you get into with this. And we'll see from some of the references in this postcard where he got some of this influence from, the people that he was inspired by. These are a two-page spread of the original art from Heritage Auctions, from a story he did for, I guess it was in Creepy, called Daddy and the Pie, about a story about an alien that crash lands on Earth. And I think it's in the 1940s in the story. Very beautiful stuff. One of my favorite stories by him. And this is from one of the DC Comics war books, a story called The Glory Boys, written by Robert Kanigher. And yeah, like I grew up on this stuff. I mean, like lots of people probably watching this video did. Just fantastic work, very inspiring. And I guess I was an odd cookie being a kid because I didn't really have a favorite. Some people are staunch Marvel, some are staunch DC fans, and some are people who go for one style. But I liked all the different styles, the different artists. I loved the kind of cartoony emotional exaggeration, you could say, of Jack Kirby, but I also liked the more literal realism of Alex Toth. And anyway, I guess I'll get to reading this card. And let me just put myself back here. What are we going to do here? I guess like this. But I'll start out reading some of it. And what I've done is I've lined up some of the references, a few of them that he makes in here, just to make it a little bit more visual. But it's from 20th June 1988. He says, "Dear Paul, nice hearing from you, kiddo. Yes, I've got some pages left, so name your poison, Haas." And this was me inquiring, I believe, about, I had seen him not that long before at a convention in Toronto, and he had this massive portfolio of all this original art. I think I said this in one of my other videos, you kind of kick yourself looking back. Should have gotten a bank loan and bought the whole, lock, stock, and barrel. But I must have written him after this, asking if he could sell me stuff, which I don't believe I actually followed up on. Is John still publishing? He's got lots of my covers and a foreword Milton Caniff's too, for the two Patsy books, if he gets them out. And this is all in reference to, I'll go down here, Dragon Lady Press. And when he says John, he's referring to a man called John Biernat, who had this bookstore called the Dragon Lady Comic Shop in Toronto, but he also did this Dragon Lady Press. And here's my little AI summary I just coughed up using the Brave browser, but it just gathers information. Dragon Lady Press was a Canadian comic book publisher that operated from 1985 to 1988. During its existence, the company focused on reprinting classic newspaper comic strips in various formats. One notable series they published was Bravo for Adventure, which was his own book, his own story that he wrote and drew, featuring the art of legendary comic book artist Alex Toth. And you can see that, as it's set up here, from 1985 to 1988, they were publishing, and actually it looks like Alex did a lot of work for them, covers and a couple of portfolios and things. And I'm not covering all of that in this. It's just so that people have a sense of what he's talking about here. Dragon Lady Press was the publishing wing of the Toronto-based comic book store Dragon Lady Comics. And they reprinted classic comic strips such as Alley-Oop, Buzz Sawyer, and Johnny Hazard. Overall, Dragon Lady Press played a significant role in preserving and promoting classic comic book art, including the work of Alex Toth during the 1980s. Certainly by publishing Bravo for Adventure, they kept his original work going. And so moving on, he's asking about one of the other people that was involved with Dragon Lady, a man named Dave Dorigo. Did Dave Dorigo quit or stay on? Let me know what's what. I'll go back to the what's what. Dave's not written for months. Don't expect hearing from John, but hope you'll receive my gratis copies of all books with my covers, etc. I gotta wait through it. It's probably easier on the screen, but the card's kind of small, and I'm deciphering this. Don't know just when my Zorro paperback and hardcovers will debut. Should be quite soon, I think. I must have asked him about this, like what he was working on. So I think this is what he's referring to from Eclipse Comics. This is the original art. I'm going to make it a little bigger if I can. This is the original art, which is beautiful and simple, which he refers to in a moment. And here's the color version of it. Very nice. And it's a good example of when the design, the design and drawing is strong. You don't need super fancy coloring to make it visually sell. And this is, I think, very nicely done. And this is one of the other covers for Volume 2. Again, very nice integration of all the graphics and color. So he said he's also drawn and colored 2 covers for Eclipse's upcoming Merchants of Death series, both of which got busier than intended, as you'll see. I'll show those in a second. I tossed in clutter by the shovelful, unlike my Zorro art. New covers and tip-in plate, oh well. So you can see he can be quite critical, self-critical, and aware of what he was doing. But I guess that's the game, you know. You draw stuff, you have to produce it for a deadline. Sometimes it turns out great and everything's singing. Other times, you know, it's good enough to be published, but maybe you look back and say, I could have done this differently. I could have made it simpler. And I guess it depends on the state of mind and the winds of fate, the winds of drawing fate. He says that he tossed in clutter like the shovelful. So I guess he means these covers. He's talking about Merchants of Death here. And I mean, I like it. I kind of see what he means. And maybe the title could be a little bigger, maybe to help give something bigger to grab onto. But it's integrated in the drawing, so I guess they couldn't change that. And here's the color version, which I don't know if he colored this and did a color guide, or if he had somebody else do it. But I think that the coloring's not really serving it that well here, because it's not, in terms of black and white, like gray tones, it's not really clarifying the planes of the cover. And I think with modern coloring, if you strained yourself from the Photoshoppery, you could do color holds on the background art and make the what's here, the black line, you could make it into a different, slightly different color and help separate everything too. And I think it would work a lot better. Maybe make this foreground guy hiding in these in this cool sort of gap here. You can make him kind of darker and have him bottom lit, and I think that would look really cool. So, but you know, again, it's easy to critique. It's still beautiful work. And here's one other one he did. I couldn't find a higher resolution version of this, but I guess it's the second one in this series. That's number 4, and the other one was number 3. Yeah. So moving on with the postcard, because again, I must have asked him about what he had been working on, and he provided me with this summary here. And he digresses for a moment. He says, someone, perhaps Dave Stevens, gave me a collection of the cartoonist profiles, CP cartoonist profiles, Roy Crane scrapbook pages, notes, but I have no idea where it is in my funny old house. So maybe I asked him if he had seen the Roy Crane scrapbook, which is something subject of a separate video. He had some great notes for himself and his assistants for cartooning tips and so on. Then he says, I did a DC cover for issue 616 of Action Comics Weekly, Blackhawk. I think that's this one here. So far, though I'm told it was well received, no further requests for more. Same old dumb DC hurry up and wait silliness. Nonsense. And they owe me $50 for my color guide, voucher screw up, etc. Damn. So I guess he's carping about DC not being up to date on keeping in touch with him. Now he goes on to talking about other cartoonists from that were his inspiration. He talks about Frank Robbins and Milton Caniff. I think he even mentions Noel Sickles here. So I'll show some of that. Probably most people watching this will be very familiar with those references. But if there's an outsider who comes in and is just curious and is watching this, it's a great intro to earlier influences. So he mentions Frank Robbins. So I'll show him first. But actually, Frank Robbins, I believe, was slightly later than Milton Caniff and Noel Sickles, who shared a studio. And I think they're really the originators or the main influences of this kind of black and white. This is a color strip from 1959 for Frank Robbins' Johnny Hazard strip. But in the black and white version of these, this very stark, high contrast lighting, almost film noir style of comic book cartooning. It was really revolutionary. And this is Noel Sickles' work, who was really, I think, the key to it. He shared a studio with Milton Caniff, but I think the story goes that really he was the key driving force. There's only a couple of examples I've shown here, but I just love this. And it really astounded me when I saw this because, like many people, I'd seen Terry and the Pirates by Milton Caniff, but when you see this stuff, just incredible. Look at that brush inking with line work, probably pen line work. High contrast lighting. And this is great because I guess they were using the, he was using the craft tint method of, or Ben-Day, I think they call it. The gray was like developed off this special paper with a brush and a special wash that wherever you put the fluid down from these craft tint bottles, it would bring out the tone. And actually, I'm not 100% sure if these strips were done using that method, but it looks like they were. But it's really great because I've only got this one example. I didn't want to overload things, but if you can see here where my cursor is, the edges of the line work are missing on the gray tones. Like he didn't slavishly outline everything. He had the confidence to put in the blacks. I'm assuming first the line work in the blacks, and then he left everything for the gray tone to hold it. And it really gives a feeling of light, you know, strong light and shade. And he obviously did it on the lighter things like the woman's hair, and in particular, and some of the shadows on the, for example, on this guy's back over here. If you had put a black line around that, it would just be too much. You could make it work, but it gives it a lighter feeling. And it was apparently quite revolutionary to do this kind of stuff because people had been doing more kind of just strong cartoony line work, and then he introduced in this, Scorchy Smith is the name of the strip. He introduced this kind of really stunning, very bold cinematic adventure cartoon storytelling. So Alex Toth was influenced by this, and you can see the influence that he loved this kind of high contrast lighting and a very graphic approach to cartooning, using black masses as strong graphic elements. And so anyway, Alex, I think, kind of looked up to these guys, revered them as his influences, Noel Sickles, Milton Caniff, and then Frank Robbins, and I'm sure others. I think he's mentioned people like Morton Eskin. But here he's relating to me that this is back in 1988. So continuing on, he says, wrote Frank Robbins in Mexico. Frank Robbins had moved there, about Milton Caniff's passing Easter Sunday and Mrs. Caniff on the 11th of May. And Canyon's Finney 15 June, that he's referring to the strip that, the newspaper comic strip that Milton Caniff was doing, Steve Canyon. So I guess it ended not long after, on the 15th of June. And he said that Frank Robbins had caught NBC TV's 15-second news bit by satellite and Time Magazine's 2-paragraph obituary 2 weeks later. And I guess it's a bit mournful, but he says, so much for a 60-year career, but he hadn't heard, like Frank Robbins hadn't heard of Noel Sickles' death 5 years ago. He asked of him, I had to tell him. End of that whole school of adventure strip styling art in syndication, a subject I wrote about for the Comics Journal's upcoming Caniff tribute issue. So I guess they asked Alex to contribute something to it. Frank's lost sight in one eye, is 70, paints daily, as does his wife, and is a happy emigre down there, very up, positive, active in a colony of U.S. world writers, artists, etc., like Paris in the 20s. And then this is kind of rounding back to mentioning stuff about me and the local scene here in Toronto back then, which I didn't actually know that much about. By that point, I was a little bit away from comics and doing a lot of illustration work, and pretty much on my own. Like, I wasn't in a regular touch with people like the ones at the Dragon Lady. So I'm sure I couldn't really answer much of Alex's questions. But he says, well, Paul, I've heard some big-time jazz about Mr. X, Bill Marx, or whatever, but can't remember what. Bill Marx and Mr. X is the comic book I was involved with. And I'd on and off done things for them later, some covers and things. He said, I've heard some big-time jazz about Mr. X, Bill Marx, or whatever, but can't remember what. Is he expanding or has a movie deal or being sued or all three? I guess that's a touchy humor there from Alex. How are you in your own little house? I had a house I had bought on my own at that point, a little bungalow, back before the crazy days nowadays of housing inflation, prices everywhere. Thanks to being bought up by good old BlackRock or whatever the hell it is, and all the other economic craziness from governments. But back then you could actually find a little starter house, as they call it, which is what I did in Toronto, and I bought one. Another whole story. Do you have enough work? Pays well? Hope so. Don't hear from anyone up north at all, so fill me in, will you? All the best to you. Keep well, Alex. And that's the end of that card. And he had sent this to, I had a studio back then, 67 Mowat Avenue, and I had rented it in a industrial kind of building. So I had this little studio, and I was freelance cranking out my different stuff. So to kind of round this video out, I'm going to just show a few more things that Alex had done for Dragon Lady Press, the Canadian publisher here that I had mentioned. And this is the cover and back cover that he had done for his own book that they published, which I think a main commentary, I'll show some examples here, which what I think are the color guides. I'm really not even sure. My main commentary in a lot of these is I really like the work, of course, but I don't feel 100% strong in the way that they colored it with flat colors for whoever did that. And again, not to be an overcritic, but I feel like it's not serving it as well as it could. I think that probably whoever did it was trying, but there's some, and they may have even been following his guides, but in the translation into flat color, there's some kind of odd things like this. I feel is not really what it could be. Like the colorist in me feels like this could be really super powerful if it was better colored. Like the way that there's white on the title and then super black box in here, it's just very distracting, especially in here. There's a big blank spot and you're kind of like your eye doesn't really know where to look. And again, they may have been trying to follow what he had suggested. I'm not really sure of the story of how this came to be. But I think when I look at the black and white, the dynamism of this black and white work, you could actually color this to be much more powerful, knock this kind of back and have it like a more mysterious archipelago of old ships and things that are vanishing off into the sandy distance, you know? And the sky is so dark here that you're not sure what it is. Is it a sandstorm? Is it sunset? You know? And then these shines over here are so distracting that it's kind of a little bamboozling for the eye. Now, I guess I'm going into kind of analysis critique mode, but what the heck. This I just came across. I hadn't seen everything because, as I said, there's so much, but I came across this just before making this episode in digging. And I hadn't seen these for whatever reason, but I guess these are the color guides, maybe? Somebody in the comments, I'm sure, will know. But I really like this. I don't know why they wouldn't just print this as the cover. I don't know if this is on a Xerox. It looks like it's on the original art, so I don't know really the whole story. Did they extract original blacks from this and then recolor it? Maybe. This is all done pre-digital, so I'm not really sure the entire story there. And I'm saying it looks original because if you look at the black ink here, it looks like it's, see if I can zoom in. It looks like it's, yeah, it's markered in. Now, I don't know if he remarkered that in over a Xerox as he was coloring it, or if this is the original marker. It looks like it the way this marker here is lighter. It looks like it's just the original drawing, and I think he wrote that it's print size. Print size 8.5/11, drawn print size. Yeah, so he did these things quite small. And it was his version in this case of the Johnny Hazard character by Frank Robbins. And he would put as mimed by, because I guess that was his way of, I don't know, being slightly uncomfortable maybe to redo these characters that he loved. This one I hadn't seen before either. I'm not sure if I ever saw this in print or the version. I'm sure it must have been. But again, I really like this. I mean, the only thing I find distracting if you were going to print this as is the uneven patchiness on the red, which it looks to me like this was meant just to be a color guide. I don't know, but you could fix that nowadays easily digitally with digital means to even this red out so it's more pleasing. The patchiness on the brick wall back here doesn't really matter. I think even back then with masking techniques, they could have fixed this, the red color here easily, but I like the kind of natural feel as opposed to the sort of mechanical feel of these kind of things. It just, to me, it just didn't hold. I don't know. It's really also the color choices. Like on this one, there's white concrete back here. I don't know. It just, I guess I'm going to stop myself from going into an extensive critique, but I just don't feel like it works that well. And on the back cover here, it's really hard to read with all these strange colors, like the blue and the yellow. Very odd. But anyway, we'll go on to some more. This is a black and white piece he did for one of the covers for Buzz Sawyer, which is a fantastic series by Roy Crane. And I guess it's, is that a torpedo bomber or a dive bomber circling over the ship on fire? This is for Al Williamson's Secret Agent X9 book. And again, this looks like a color guide, I'm going to assume. And here is the printed cover. So again, this is very dark, and personally, I don't feel it works as well. Like this maybe looks a little unfinished in the sense that, again, I think it needs more color up here. I can see why they put a color into into this white area. Like there's too much white here. But maybe not if they had left it and put these two circular boxes, two circular, like whatever you call them. I think he's got a word for it up here. No, but I just find this kind of overdone with the yellow, and then with this blue thrown in here, like he had a light blue here with some kind of colored pencil, and that might have worked, but the blue here is too dark, and it's very arresting. Like your eye just stops there, and then the white is so contrasty that I don't know, it's just, you're not sure where to look. Again, the principle being that your eye goes to where the contrast is, and your eye kind of hunts around, and so a well done piece of design knows about that, and you kind of allow for that. So you're going to have your maximum contrast at the points of interest that are built into the drawing. So that would naturally be here in the title. But again, I find this way too overpowering, like even a much lighter yellow on the background here, and maybe lighter on these two circles would have done wonders for this cover, even if you're going to have this very strong yellow back here. But I like this, again, with a stronger version of this cover, or sorry, of the logo. You could even almost print this as is. Let's zoom in on this again and have a little look-see as I round out my little postcard adventure here. It's uneven, but certainly nowadays with Photoshop, you could maybe make that a little less patchy. I don't mind it. It's kind of fun. And again, the organic nature of it appeals to me. I find that much more interesting than the over flatness of this. Because it's one thing when you print color, like back here on this Batman cover, you printed on newsprint back in those days, and the newsprint it was almost white back then, but over the years now you always see it's kind of gone yellow because of the whatever acid in the paper. But it still had a slightly off-white quality, and it had a quality of sucking in the ink and kind of evening out the dots maybe. There's maybe a tiny bit of what they call dot spread. So it kind of made a pleasing effect with the colors. These later ones were done on very shiny paper, and unless you were very careful, like these ones like this, like I said, unless you're very careful to balance the colors, it could almost get too over bright and glossy, which actually on some of the omnibuses they've done now, you can see different versions of this effect. But on some, like I bought the New Gods omnibus from DC Comics, and I was really pleased to see they'd done a pretty good job of balancing that over glossiness and brightness of the older flat colors. Like they'd been faithful to the older coloring, and it looked like they had kind of balanced it out. It's maybe a little brighter than the original comics would have looked, but not that overpowering sickly effect that you get. Like I find these older colors very, very pleasing, and again, they were kind of softened by the printing process. So anyway, there you go. That's postcards from Alex number 10, Toth cards, and from 1988. So I've got like a whole folder of these, and therefore there's a whole bunch more. There's a whole bunch more of these to read. So I've got no lack of them to do, and I think that as I've got this new format for people who've been following me a little bit, where I can show stuff at the same time as reading it out. So I've got lots more of these to cover, and they will be used to kind of refer to various things in comics history as he worked on various projects. So again, thank you for listening to this, and if you'd like to, please share this. It always helps to get more exposure. And comment. I'll try and respond to all comments sooner or later. Sometimes it takes me a while to catch up to all of them, but yeah, all the usual jazz. Like, follow, subscribe. Yes, I've got some pages left, so name your poison, Hoss. He had that way of talking. It was very charming, actually. You kind of took it tongue-in-cheek, like it's kind of a bit of fun. It was his old school way of talking about things. Anyway, thanks for listening for all you Toth fans out there, and see you next time. Bye for now.